Hello everyone and welcome back to Unity of Command. This is the campaign scenario Donbas Nip, and it is the last scenario taking place in the Blackturn DLC. Let's read the description. January the 18th, 1942. Germans moved to secure Rostov as the springboard for an offensive into the Caucasus, which is planned for the following summer. Unknown to them, a massive Soviet operation to cross the Donets just gets underway. And it's really strange that this is the last scenario, because in reality, historically, this battle took place months earlier, so between September and December, with most of the fighting taking place in November, the second half of November, where the Germans actually captured Rostov for a few days before retreating. And incidentally, this was the first major Soviet victory on the Eastern Front of the war. So I have no idea why this is the last scenario. This is stated to be a hard one, and actually my first exposure or experience with this one was on a Steam for a discussion forum, where users were confirming to each other that obtaining a brilliant victory is impossible on this map, even with prestige spending. And the scenario creator clearly thought that this was a difficult scenario because it yields us 1200 points to win, which is the second biggest point yield after Typhoon. And the number of forces participating in the battle doesn't necessitate, so this is not like a really huge scenario, as you will see in a moment. But anyway, what you're going to see is my first or second attempt, depending on how you look at it. I restarted once at the in the middle of the first turn, because some of my attacks didn't turn out well. So this is the first real attempt, and I immediately managed to win it, and my strategy worked out exactly as intended. So I didn't find it that difficult. It's obviously it's not an easy map, but by this time, once you have beaten Typhoon, then you should be able to get this one as well in a couple of attempts. As for our forces, or as for the forces allocated, as you can see, we are heavily outnumbered, almost 3-1. Nobody receives any reinforcements really, so rather 2.5-1. And we receive 2 air attacks per turn, which is awesome, and also an air supply drop each turn, which can also come in very handy. It's actually quite important, because you will see the supply situation is very weird. The Soviets do not have any tank units, but that should not come as a surprise. We know that their best units are actually cavalry or motorized divisions, which have interesting special steps attached, like T-34s, etc. And there is a lot of them, of course. And they also receive an air attack per turn, and as we know, the Red Air Force is quite efficient, so it's quite effective rather. So we have our work cut out for us. And to be perfectly honest, my strategy didn't work out 100% the way you should be playing this map, because the way it works, and this is a very interesting scenario in this regard, is you can basically divide the map on up to 2 sectors, the front up to 2 sectors. The first sector is everything south of the Donets, around this area, where all of our objectives are, all of them. The other sector is where all the Soviet forces are, basically, and where they're trying to make a push. And I didn't read the description actually, didn't realize that they were gonna make a push, and it caught me quite by surprise. And obviously we don't have sufficient units to counterattack or advance in that direction, whatever. But my strategy worked out perfectly in the southeast. So we have 3 objectives, and we have quite a lot of time to capture them, actually 7 turns each. We'll get back to them, but let's take a look at the objectives first. Let's do it real quick. So first of all, we have Rostov in the extreme south, starting point for the next summer's offensive into the Caucasus. And then we have Voroshilovgrad, 2 hexes away from our current positions. industrial center in the north of the Donbas region. And in the east, we have Kamensk cut off the main supply link from the north. Right, all of these or each of these need to be taken by the end of turn 7. So this looks promising at first, until you look at the terrain and the supply situation. So obviously the Mayas River is here, and there is high ground here, which not only grants extra bonuses for the defender, not that they need such bonuses, but it also causes supply to run out faster. So supply doesn't cross the mountains very well. So basically your only way to resupply is here through this bridge, and this is very firmly held. And other than that, there is really nothing else to look out for apart from the river, the Donets River. Obviously we need to hold the front line. And as for our supply, this is the problem. We have supplies coming from almost everywhere, from the west and northwest, from Kharkov and from the extreme west, but they are all range 4. So what that means is that we cannot advance really in this direction north, so between the two rivers, without risking running out of supply. So even if you take most of the road, you're still going to be struggling with your supply situation. So if you're going for a normal victory or something like that, then you actually should fight like alongside this supply route, which is very difficult, and capture the objectives like that. The Soviets cannot be cut off. They have a ton of supply sources. I don't understand this one, which is on the road, but it literally works for another hex. So, but anyway, they have off-road supply sources, on-road supply sources. You don't have the manpower and the capacity to cut them off. So basically, unless you can isolate groups, small groups of units, you can count with them being always in supply practically. All right. As for the situation, what's crucial here is that they have a bridgehead here in the southwest of the Donets, and we have a bridgehead here east of Kharkov, which is not very useful, by the way, and you should remove it once it gets under pressure. Our units are dug in, but they are very weak, the ones that are holding the riverfront line. So as long as the AI attacks across the river, they're going to do an awesome job. But once they have to fight head on, then once the AI has crossed the river, then they're not really that useful. And we have this little pocket or gap here, but unless you can hold the river, then this is actually more of a predicament than an advantage. And none of these forces are really formidable. Here we have our main units that we can use to attack, and there aren't many of them. We have the Leibstandarte, and this time once again it's in an SS formation with a tank attachment. This is an excellent unit, elite and all, but it has 3 active steps. We'll get back to this. We also have the 5th SS Division Viking with us, also elite but only with 4 active steps. And we have 3 Panzer divisions and 1 motorized division. Everything else is kind of worthless. We have a few veteran Gebirgsjäger units, but with their 4 active steps, they're not very useful. And we have a lot of auxiliary, well, not a lot, but quite a few auxiliary forces. So the fast division from Slovakia and 3 Italian divisions, including the motorized one, which is not better than the standard infantry, by the way. They're totally worthless, but at least this one is fast. So these forces are insufficient to break through this extremely well positioned Soviet line here on the other side of the Mayas River. So what do you have to do? The Soviets have special steps, T-34, Katyushas, guns, and especially on the attack they have a lot of tanks. So yeah, there you just have to hold, but here you have to cut through. And the way it works is you have to dig to the northeast, you have to punch through to the northeast, capture this victory hex, threaten them, and then that way the AI will reallocate forces from other front lines, and will probably push you back, but that's fine. You can recapture that victory hex later. The idea would be to push around the river and capture this hex. Fortunately, in the extreme south, we're on the other side of the river, so you can also push. You can also attack this unit and with some shifting of the units, we are able to slowly whittle them down, and one moment they're going to just yield, and we can push through here as well. And at the very least, we need to capture the other side of the bridge. We have 7 turns, or at least like 5 turns to achieve this, which is not easy, by the way, even in this time frame, as you have very few units. So even for this strategy, your units are insufficient. So what do you have to do? Well, we have 2 Sicherung security units in the back with 4 steps each, and you don't need them. The AI doesn't have the partisan special action capability. So these units are dug in the middle of nowhere. They're totally worthless. They're not doing anything, and they're not useful even if you bring them to the front lines either. So immediately reorganize them. We are back to receiving 5 infantry steps per turn, and reinforce the SS and the motorized division with it. We will lose experience with it, but still the stats are so much higher, and of course they immediately arrive in the front. These units will become still extremely powerful, and if they can regain some of their experience throughout the battle, then they'll remain powerful. So that's what you have to do. Free up or reorganize at least these 2 units, and if you can, any other standard infantry unit. And don't reorganize the auxiliary ones. You cannot allocate them to German units, so that's not a good idea. And once you have these 3 units buffed up and at maximum or near maximum strength, then they will be good enough. They will be among your best forces, and they, along with these 3 tank or panzer divisions, they will have to win the battle. So let's see how it went. First I attack here because, as I've told you, our main objective is this victory hex now, so that the AI gets spooked. And I immediately reorganize that unit because I'm going to also use that one to reinforce my better units, so the ones that are either experienced or whatever. And we can immediately capture this hex and hold it with the Viking. The AI has nothing that can break this siege, so that's great. And as I've said, just use the shuffling to dislodge this unit. I was thinking that I would use the Panzer to cross the river, but that's not gonna happen, as you'll see. Actually, it's not really a good idea, so try to move your Panzers to the north. And I move a lot of my units here and move up the auxiliary to hold the front line. Across the river, they're fine. So across the river, they will hold their own, even if they're not entrenched. And I give up this side of the bridge because I thought that this unit was very much in a perilous situation. This will allow the Soviets to reconnect, and as you can see, some of their units situated here are already out of supply, but that's what it is. And thanks to our success capturing the victory hex in turn 1, this is obviously not at all mandatory, like we don't need it for a lot of turns still, but that makes the AI allocate forces here. And believe it or not, you actually want that, because otherwise the pressure here on the weaker side of the front line is not going to be tenable. And the reason I didn't reorganize these units was because I was afraid that the AI might have something up its sleeve that would, threaten us in the back. When I realized that was not the case, I reorganized them. And that was also the reason why I reorganized the first unit, because I knew that we would need infantry reinforcements to allocate them to better units. And here is something. This unit is not dug in. They're on equal terms, but the Soviets attack, and this is the result. As you can see, these units can hold their own. Well, of course, this one has a gun, so that was worse. But normally these units can hold their own relatively well against the Soviet onslaught. And on the defensive, see, even the auxiliary Italian units are pretty powerful. On the other hand, the Red Air Force is very effective. We got lucky this time, but in the next turn they're going to cause us grievous casualties. So, as long as we are defending, especially in better terrain, so in better position, then we're going to be fine. And you can also eliminate this bulge to shorten your front line as well. And especially this bridgehead in the east. This is not at all needed. Okay, turn 2, as you can see, we are already running out of supply here and here as well. But finally we are receiving we're already receiving the reinforcements from the infantry units. And my idea was to try to push towards the south so that we can link up with our forces on this side of the river. As you will see, this did not go very well, to put it mildly. So I put the Slovakians there, and that was actually a very smart move in hindsight, because the AI will try to dislodge them and attack this victory hex with all their forces. And believe it or not, this fast division is going to put up quite a lot of fight. It's better than the Italians, by far, by the way. And although it will get destroyed eventually, the damage it causes to the Soviets is ginormous. So it's going to grind down a lot of superior Soviet forces before crumbling. So that's something useful. And like I said, we reinforced the SS. We resupplied the other SS division, and we're all fine. I can send in this SS troop now here. Unfortunately, it will not get resupplied, but eventually during the course of this scenario it will. I tried to force a crossing here, and it works out somewhat, I guess. So this works, but we cannot cross, obviously, and the AI has enough units to keep them in, to keep a contiguous front line. And now I know that these units are not needed, so I can reorganize them, and in the next turn and in the turn after that we have some infantry steps to use. The only reason I removed, if you saw my last moves, I moved out of that bridgehead, which was deliberate. Our situation is much better if we defend from behind the river, and besides, the Soviets are threatening here. And this one is on kind of on our side of the river, so I decided to keep that one to threaten the AI, and also to make it attack it. It's in a forest, it's entrenched, so it's in an excellent position. Yep, and now it's the Soviets' turn. So as I said, they want to recapture this position, and as you can see, it's going quite okay for them so far. But now with the standard infantry assaults, they are really suffering casualties. And this was in exchange for the Slovakian mobile division, we destroyed quite a lot of active steps and the half depleted units. So I call this a win. Yep. And they are already seeing that they need to allocate more forces here. They should also, the AI I think is hard-coded to push. I don't know if it's actually hard-coded or if it sees that it's in such an advantage that it tries to push. But in any case, its advance is weakened by the fact that well, we are strong. We are strong in the southeast, and it needs to send forces here to counter our offensive. And yeah, the Soviet Air Force is effective relatively. So even I don't know if you've seen the results of this battle. So the Torino Italian infantry division, which is basically our weakest unit on the battlefield practically now that we removed everything else weaker, was attacked across the river by a standard Soviet rifle division which had a T-34, and the result was we lost 1 KI and they lost 2. So that's excellent. This is a perfect result. And yeah, eventually the AI will reposition a lot of their units east, but that will make their push in the west easier, worse, weaker. And it's not really making our progress that much harder, to be honest. I know it looks a lot, but none of these units equal our forces. And now once we supply the SS, it's still veteran, and it has 6 active steps plus a special step in the form of a Sturmgeschütz. So this has become practically our best unit, and you can see how effective it is right now. Yup. And yup again. And finally we are advancing a bit, at least. I'm still trying to push towards the south, as you can see, and I recaptured the city hex again. The idea here is that that way we will be able to draw their fire and ire onto us, and that's a good idea. We're also pushing to the south. I know that some of these units are out of supply, but we only have one one special action to resupply them, so it's gonna have to go to this tank division, and that's why I pulled the Viking back, because it needs to be automatically resupplied. I also want to put reinforcements to them, and when they are out of supply at the beginning of the turn, you cannot resupply them. If they run off from the supply grid, you can, like you just saw. So it's possible to, it was possible to resupply, to reinforce this unit with active steps, passive steps that will turn active hopefully soon. But I want to reinforce this unit as well, and that's why I pulled it back. After some costly battles, we actually gain a foothold here, and I want to hold the river line because that's obviously a superior position. And finally, I give up on the idea of using this tank to push through here. It was not going on it's not going well, so it actually, I shouldn't have wasted 2 turns on this. I should have immediately reallocated it to the front in the northeast, where it has more, you know, options to maneuver. And now the Soviets have 2 gaps or 2 offensive pushes to hold and to plug, and both of them are quite competent. So this is great. This means that their main push in the west, the northwest, is even weaker. And again, they still have nothing that they can you know, use against us that is anything equivalent. Now they're going to use the air attack, and there's nothing, thankfully. And yes, their guns are good, but you know, as long as we can hold, we're fine. And unfortunately, this turn we couldn't hold. They broke through the Italian infantry units, and not only did they destroy this weakened infantry, but broke the river front line, which is not great. This is a situation we need to consider. So I didn't think that after reallocating so many forces they would still be pushing, and that was a problem. This means that unfortunately on turn 4 we have to draw forces away from the main front line, specifically this veteran panzer division, and need to use it to plug the gap. We cannot allow ourselves to be cut off. Our supply is horrible as it is already. So so that's the solution I came up with. I know it's not ideal, and these units are also cut off from supply, so I need to you know, get them back. Basically it's a withdrawal, but I don't care, we're fine. We don't need to hold these forests or this river band here. And as you can see, the SS is regaining its elite status, so that's great. I decided to resupply this unit and not the tank division because I want to capture the road, and I want to capture the supply route, and this is not going as well as I planned so far. Right? Hopefully soon we will be able to push. Obviously your infantry is weak, so don't use them if you can avoid it. I really wanted to break this unit, but it's not going to happen, and I decide to retreat. I decide to use a different approach. The Soviets will recapture the victory hex, but we'll also bunch up in front of it, and this weakened unit I hope we can remove, and then the road will be connected up until this point at least, and our supply will be better. So I'm really hoping to achieve a breakthrough here on turn 5. Of course our time is slowly running out, which is not great, but what can you do? And actually the AI uses a weak unit to recapture this city hex with, so that's fine. By reallocating this unit, their assault in the west has basically faltered, although they did cross the river here, which is a problem. And yeah, the air attack kills one of our SS steps, so I was not happy about that. An elite unit's loss for practically nothing. And you can already see that we have 3 more turns to capture these 3 hexes, and there are a lot of units to cut through. Oh, and they actually received 1 step as reinforcements, that's great. But I'm not that scared. Their units are still quite weak, so they're fine. I resupply the SS. This unit can exist for another turn without supply, and I'm really hoping to capture the road hex, and then everything should be fine. We need to contain this assault, and this was the simplest way to do it. Form a contiguous front line. It's not a It's not great by any means, but all they need to do is hold at least for some time. And since the attackers always lose more steps than the defenders, or normally at least, that means that hopefully they will simply run out of steam eventually. Now I try to recapture the hex just to threaten. It's not crucial or anything, but when you do that, then the AI gets all spooked, so that's a good idea to do that. And this turn I really want to reconnect the eastern side of the river, and obviously it works out. So we have achieved a kind of a breakthrough. I know there is still a front line in front of us, but at least our supply runs, you know, as long as we can keep them connected, they run from these hexes, so we're all good. And now it's time to dig deep into the Soviet forces, and once achieving this move, you can see that apart from that tank division and the one in the city X, every other unit is in supply. Which is kind of crucial. I know we gave up some road hexes for this, but it's not really important. Our idea here, and now even the tank is in supply, so literally the only unit we don't have in supply is the one in the Victory Axe, and we're gonna resupply them from the air, so that's fine. And our strategy is going to actually be to capture Rostov from the east, believe it or not. There I can hold the Maya's front line as long as it wishes. So we have 2 further turns to achieve that. We need to capture both victory axes, but we're very close to them, and nothing that's standing against us is really formidable, and all of our units are in supply, so the SS divisions will be very powerful, and this motorized one too, as you will see in a moment. Alright, they form another cohesive front line, but this time it's quite weak, and as long as our front line is holding here, I'm fine. I know it's not truly holding, but well, we're kind of okay. Unfortunately, we really have to reallocate this unit there to assist in the defense in the west. And the AI bombs our elite Panzer division, the one that turned elite with all these battles, and it manages to KIA one of the steps. I really was not happy about that one, but there is nothing to do about it. I don't recommend you reorganize your tank units. You can, and you can reinforce the other ones with it, but then you have 2 very strong units, and instead of 2 just really strong ones, sorry, 3 really strong ones, so it's better to have the 3 veteran. These are still excellent, they are still great units. And with this push like this, we managed to drive next to Rostov, thereby allowing our elite Leibstandarte to attack it. It wasn't a very successful battle, but we did remove its entrenchment, and therefore I'm hoping that we will be able to take it the next turn. Now it's time to drive towards the Kamensk objective, and yes, this tank is relatively weak, but we are right next to it, and the next turn hopefully we will get it. Alright, once again we form a cohesive line, we try to destroy whatever we can, and this turn I realized that the next turn is the final one, so we need all the forces we can get in the east, and as long as these infantry divisions can hold the supply intact, this route intact, which I hope they will, then we're gonna be okay. Now it's the last turn for the Soviets to do something meaningful, and as you can see, they're not really doing it. They're crossing the river here, but it's of no consequence. They're cutting this off, which is also of 0 consequence. And as long as we can hold this hex on the bridge and the front line, we're fine. As you can see, their attacks are bouncing off from our units. This air attack fortunately did nothing. And so they didn't manage to either break through or alleviate pressure from their victory hexes. These units won't resupply, but I mean ours, because they're too far from our supply lines, but they're fine. If they are not in full supply, like the SS, we can still airdrop them, so it's all good. Unfortunately, our first attack immediately causes the enemy unit to flee, and our motorized division can capture the city X. This was great because I can use both of my air attacks on this victory hex, and they did nothing, but I could still do it. And I forgot to refill the supply for this unit for some reason, but it still worked out well. and we still had a lot of units to throw at this Victory X, so we could still remove easily this weakened rifle division and attack from the north with, for instance, the Viking. So our victory was not at all in danger. Alright, that's it for this scenario and for the Blackturn DLC. I really don't see why this scenario is considered to be so difficult. Just shuffle your 2 units around in the south and attack until you force a breakthrough. Attack across the mountains, capture both the Victory Axe, but feel free to abandon it when needed. And try to hold it with a relatively strong but not your strongest unit, so that the AI will attack it. The Slovakian fast division is excellent. You can't really use it offensively. So it's excellent for this purpose, and it's relatively okay in defense. It's something you don't mind losing, and if it takes down a lot of attackers with it, then so if it makes good trades, then that was more than worth it. And once you manage to capture the eastern side of the bridge, then you're basically fine. Just always make sure that your units remain roughly in supply, and attack the Victory Axis as you see fit. Another very important thing is to reorganize units. Immediately, if I replay this now truly for the second time, I would immediately reorganize the 2 security units to bolster the SS forces and the mobile division with it, a motorized division. But you can also free up units here and there to boost them to maximum strength, to 7 active steps. And when that's done, these units are practically unstoppable. The Soviets have nothing that can measure up, especially if these units are on the defensive. They're still excellent on the offensive, but when they're on the defensive, then there is literally nothing the Soviets can push at them. They will tear everything to shreds, even if they sink down to veteran experience level. So that's it. It's not a very long map, even though it has 7 turns, but basically your whole offensive takes place in this little river triangle, this area that is surrounded by the Don, the Donets, and the Mayas practically. And on the other fronts, you just have to push. Don't be afraid to give up ground to the Soviets. Just don't give up this supply route. That's it. You can even retreat up to it, but your initial positions are superior, so try to hold it as long as you can. Always plug the gaps, and that's it really. Once you're secure, and once you have bolstered your best units, then then the Soviets cannot stop you. All right. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you succeed in this scenario if you try it for yourself. I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.